So, hi again. My name is Alon Girmonsky. I'm the founder and CEO of BlazeMeter. I'm very happy to be in front of you today. I'm going to discuss load testing, specifically in combination with Selenium, as well as other open source tools, but today mostly around Selenium and how to connect it into your CI pipeline. Okay, but kind of, and just kind of to frame the conversation, it will be a live demo with showing you live things that you can do immediately right after this session if you choose to. But I will start with 5 PowerPoint slides just to make sure that we all understand the terminology. Okay, so just kind of for my sake, how many people know what Selenium is in this room? Awesome. So it's basically the vast majority. How many people know what JMeter is in this same room? Okay, relatively the same. Okay. So Selenium can be used for a lot of things, but I will talk about Selenium in the specific use case of load testing. So I will not talk about compatibility testing and testing this operating system with this browser, etc., but mostly how to load test your backend specifically with leveraging Selenium, reusing your functional tests and Selenium code. So for this specific case, I would treat Selenium as a way to automate browsers to generate traffic, okay, different browsers. I'm sure this is not news to you. And in terms of JMeter, the difference is where with Selenium, the traffic is generated by the browser, so it's closer to real life. With JMeter, the same traffic is being generated in a syntactic fashion, and the most common use case is API and load. And most of you know, raised their hand when I asked about Selenium and JMeter. How many people know what Torus is? Okay, so hopefully you'll learn something new today. Torus is basically a test automation framework. It is another open source, completely open source tool. It's a test automation framework that helps you automate open source testing tools. So in this example, it's Selenium and JMeter, but the support goes beyond. It goes to the Grinder, Gatling, Locust, Siege, and others. Okay, but today I'm going to speak specifically around Selenium and touch as well JMeter. In terms of automation, you may end up within your day-to-day operation building test scripts, right, to test either functional element of your code or backend element of your code, API elements of your code. You want to be able to leverage, to use these tests to run in an automated fashion, and sometimes in parallel to other different tests. Ideally, let's say in an ideal environment, you would have a test for every code segment, for every function, for every API transaction. And when you commit your code or do any code change, you would want to run all of these tests in parallel, not only to save time, but to achieve better test coverage. So again, just to emphasize before I go to the live demo, because I'm going to touch on these two tools, when you load test or do any sort of back-end testing, meaning testing the back-end, you apply traffic on the back-end according to a certain scenario and then see what's going on, right? When you do it through Selenium, Selenium automates browsers, the browsers generate the traffic hits the back-end. When you do it through JMeter, JMeter by itself hits the backend. Okay? So this is, hopefully you've enjoyed the PowerPoint presentation. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Okay. Okay, I'm going to run through a few examples of Torus okay, and Torus configuration files. And if, for example, you're curious of what Torus is, you can go now to the website. It's http gettorus.org, right? And you can see exactly what Torus. You can download it and start using it. But the idea is that you can define your test universe through a readable and writable language, or through JSON format that you can generate the JSON format within your code. But when I say your test universe, I'll give a few examples. I want to build a Selenium test that goes through 4 different transactions and assert different properties upon each transaction. I may want to do the same in a different tool, like JMeter, or Gatling, or Locust, right? Why? Because I want to do it through Selenium because I want to automate the browser to do it. I care more about realistic traffic, less about the scale of it. I want to do it through JMeter because synthetic traffic is fine, but I want to reach certain scales. But I can define ahead of time how I want my script to look like without even building it. Right? Think of a compiler of sort that I can instruct JMeter or Selenium to build me a script according to whatever I put here, and I'll go through an example. And in real time, the test will be built and run against whatever it's supposed to run, if it's a backend or a different backend or whatever. Okay? So this is only one example. If I want to represent scenarios, let's say provisioning. Let's say I don't want to use my Jenkins servers to actually run the tests. I want the Jenkins server to trigger a set of tests. Let's say 100 different tests that I want to trigger at once with a single invocation. So the DevOps, they only do the invocation, but I'm, as a developer, can control the different tests that will run at a single invocation. Okay? And I want it to run in a different pool of resources that I allocate for testing, as opposed to my Jenkins server. It can be also in the cloud. So in terms of provisioning, thresholds, I want to apply certain thresholds to my tests. I want to, again, put fail success criteria, but from outside of my test. And I want these thresholds to apply on all of my tests. Right? So this is your test universe. It's built of scenarios, provisioning, thresholds, and a lot of others. And ideally, you would have a configuration file that you can define this test universe and do set and forget. Right? I set it once, it runs upon a commit, upon a build, pre-deployment. I can then leverage versus elements to do kind of pre-production load tests, etc. All this can be done through this configuration file. And Torus is there to interpret what's in these configuration files and build the tests, run them, analyze them, communicate the results to whomever in the ecosystem. So what you're seeing now, this is a multi-geo load test of actually 2 tools running in parallel. Let's focus on Selenium and then show a few examples. But what you see here, at the top of the line, you see browser Chrome. So I'm going to use Selenium with Chrome. And give me a second. OK. I need to remember to show some love to this machine. 1 second. OK. So going from top to bottom, browser, Chrome, timeout, 5 seconds, relieve that. Here are the following requests that I'm going to build a Selenium script. I don't have to, by the way. I can simply import an existing script you have, right? But this is another way to kind of to show what you can do with the tool. I have 3 different transactions. You see them by the URL and a label per transaction. And then I'm adding some level of assertion to one of the transactions. Like I'm asserting that the result of the 3rd transaction contains 2 elements, right? Let me tell you what's going on. One is there, so you'll get 100% OK, and the other isn't, so you'll get failure. Okay? So this is a scenario that I will soon show how it's being compiled into a Selenium script and run against basically performing this transaction with a Chrome browser. If you go to the second portion of the same page, you see in the execution clause, you actually see two clauses. Let's focus on the Selenium one. It's the bottom clause. Scenario rec, R-E-Q, which basically implies in the execution clause, I want to run the top scenario. Executor, Selenium. I'm basically hinting what execute, meaning what tool I want the script to be compiled to, right? Because if you look at the top clause, you see JMeter, same exact scenario, but the scenario will be compiled into a JMeter script, okay? Executor, Selenium. Concurrency, we have local and we have cloud. Because first, I'm going to run it locally, right, on my machine, just to show you how it's done. And I want to be able to run locally because when I'm building a test, I want to debug that test and make sure, before I commit it to the repository, I want to make sure that it actually functions. So in the local, I'm going to run a single thread. In the cloud, I'm going to do a load test of 30. It can be 300 or as many. Hold for 5 minutes, and then locations, right? I'm telling this in the single configuration file where I want this load test to come from. So when I'll run this load test, 30 browsers will launch across 3 different locations, and obviously in the pool of locations you have all of Azure, Google, Amazon, and others. The last portion, reporting JUnit XML, basically I'm telling the same configuration file, please, all of the thresholds or the assertions or whatever, put them in a JUnit XML file so Jenkins will be able to interpret and continue from there. Okay. So, you know, I'm simply going to run it, right? It's kind of, I'm going to do something very simple. First, I'm going to run it locally. Okay. Torus is a command line interface that you download, and then you run from the command line. Very easy. So this is a single file, and I'm going to do something like that. It's BZT, and I'm running the YAML file that I'm going to use it from a different screen just to be, so it will be easier to read. Okay, I'll revert to this. Okay, that's it. I'm running this. So this is a command line running. This is the local interface of Torus. What happens now is basically this test was compiled, A, to a JMeter script, B, to a Selenium script. Now, both Selenium and JMeter are running from my laptop. Like if I look at the desktop, I can actually see Selenium running. This is me operating Selenium, or Torus operating Selenium from this machine. Okay. Right. In the same time, what is not visible, that you can actually, JMeter is also running in parallel with very low concurrency. So you have these 2 tests running in parallel. You have the assertion, the lines you see with the arrows below, you actually see test failed, test expected to contain trusted 111. Obviously, the 111, something I've added just to trigger an error, okay? But you get immediately like how the test is running. Is it running as expected? What are the basic KPIs, etc. Okay. Let's see what happened when I actually ran the test. And I'm talking about the scripts that resulted from this So I'm stopping the test. I'm going into the artifact folder. Every time I'm running a test, there is a folder with all of the artifacts in it. And this is the Python script that was generated according to my blueprint, right? It's this is normal Selenium stuff generated according to the configuration file. You don't have to do it. You can import your own Selenium script and simply run it if you have one. But if you want to keep a blueprint of a test without actually building a test, you can also do it, and it will be compiled in real time. So this test was compiled in real time and run, and you've seen it earlier on my machine. Same happened, exactly the same happened for JMeter, right? But again, I won't focus on that. So I ran it locally, meaning I've built a small configuration file. I ran it locally. Okay, I figured out it's fine. Now I want to run it in the cloud. So what I'm doing is relatively the same. Only this time, this is you're not seeing the command line? Sorry for that. I'm seeing it. So here it is. This is the command line that I've used to run it locally. I'm adding -cloud, okay? The same thing will happen again, but only this time it will run in the cloud. You can see the report opening. What you see that's happening now and will allow 2 to 3 minutes for this to complete is basically, remember that I'm running 2 tests in parallel. One is a JMeter test on a single machine, and the other is a Selenium on 3 regions. So you have 4 regions in total, right? You have 1 for the JMeter script, right? And 3 for the Selenium. Okay, I'm running a multi-geo Selenium-based load test in parallel to JMeter, just to make it more spicy. Okay, so while the servers are launching, it will take roughly 2 to 3 minutes until they launch. Let's look at an existing report. Sorry, wrong one. See if I need to wait or this is coming away. One second, please bear with me. Okay, good. So it will start in 30 seconds. This is a report which is a combination of running the Selenium load test across the 3 regions and the JMeter in parallel, right? So let's try to look at the Selenium portion of it. So as you can see, like I have a different report per region. Right? In this region, only 5 concurrent users are running, but I have like all of the response time, error ratio. Remember that a third, one transaction constantly failed, right? And when I want to look at kind of the whole together, let's see if it launched, not just yet. Basically, this portion of it represents kind of, as you can see here, all of the regions aggregated into one. Okay. I have one more section to this presentation. Okay. Let's try to go back on what we've learned and see if you have any questions. And by the way, the test is still running as if it was running from my own laptop, right? It's kind of, it looks exactly like the one that I've run earlier on my laptop, but this time it runs from the cloud. The same exact thing, because this is a command line utility, I do the same within Jenkins. I simply put it in the shell portion of the post job section, and it runs every time I actually need to run it. Okay. So this is the test that is actually running now. Okay, you see the total is 40 concurrent users, which if we go back to the list, you know, the Selenium is 30 and JMeter is 10. Right? The other close is 10, so together it's 40. And this is basically it. This is the same exact test that I've built a configuration file and then compiled it, and then it was compiled when I ran it into a Selenium script and a JMeter script, uploaded to the cloud, multi-geo running, and this is the report, and the test will soon end. Okay? And again, this is the configuration file that I've started with. So this is basically the demo for running Selenium multi-geo. Obviously, you can play with it, add transaction, import files, running multiple files together, okay? Build something very unique that kind of whatever you meets your needs, and run it in the cloud, multi-geo and everything. One last thing to show is when this test completes, let's end it, right? I'm ending it from my machine. And again, when I go to the repository, it always outputs a JUnit XML file. So whenever the test ends, Jenkins can look at it and continue with the successes and failures of it. So that's for the portion of the demo. Let me know if you have any questions or point of interest here. If not, it would only mean that I overwhelmed you and you don't know what to say. If you have any more questions, things that are of interest to you, we have a booth here, BlazeMeter. Feel free to drop by and ask for a demo or ask further questions. Thank you very much.